Do you need to follow a special diet like gluten-free, dairy-free, or soy-free eating for health reasons? Has a doctor or medical professional told you to follow a special diet, but you've had trouble sticking with it, which honestly only leads to guilt and frustration, maybe secret eating or overeating, or even binging on allowed foods or not allowed foods? And then if you add to that, do you also need to lose weight? But you often find that the replacement foods are higher in calories or points or not as satisfying. And you're wondering, how can I reach my weight loss goals when I have this special diet that I need to follow? Well, if you can relate to any of this, will you tell me about it in the comments? What are the food restrictions that you need to follow, and how have you struggled with that? In this video, you'll learn the common mistakes that I have made on my own personal weight loss journey and the mistakes I see other women make and how you can avoid them. I'm Sarah with The Holy Mess, and I've been maintaining a 100-pound weight loss for almost 20 years. And the last few years, I have gone through some major elimination diets to help with digestive issues, so I totally get it. I just want to say at the start of this video, this is not medical advice, and this is sharing of my own experience. I'd always encourage you to consult a medical professional and do what's right for you. Well, 2 years ago, I started having some serious digestive issues. It started with a really, really bad case of heartburn. And I went to my doctor, I got some medication. It didn't get better. It continued to get worse. And over the course of 2 years, I got really, really sick with heartburn and bloating and stomach pain, and then eventually fatigue. And it got to the point where I was laying on the couch all the time. I couldn't work. I could barely function. At one point, I went to the emergency room because I was so sick and bloated that I knew that something was wrong. Through the course of all of this, after seeing my doctor for medication and going through endless tests, we started the diets. I started seeing a registered dietitian. I did an elimination diet, a gluten-free diet, a dairy-free diet, a soy-free diet, a low FODMAP diet, an anti-inflammatory and gut healing diet, a SIBO protocol, a biphasic diet, a low-fiber diet, a plant-based diet, and many others. Eventually, I was diagnosed with sucrose intolerance. I did start a medication and the correct diet, which is very strict. It's very low in sugars and starches. I am improving. I'm so thankful, and my hope is that eventually I will be able to return to a fully typical diet, eating all foods. Well, God has taught me so much through this experience and is still teaching me. I know I still have a lot to learn, and honestly, I've made a ton of mistakes. So everything that I'm sharing in this video is because it's mistakes that I myself have made. There is absolutely no judgment. If there's a mistake to be made, I've probably made it. So you definitely aren't alone. So the number one mistake that I have made and I have seen so many women make is assuming that a particular kind of food guidance that they hear is a rule that they absolutely must follow. And I gotta say, this is even if a medical professional tells you. I want to encourage you that you know your body best. You know your body best. And I would love to encourage you, say this out loud and then type it in the comments. I am in charge of my health and wellness. I am in charge of my health and wellness. Type that in the comments. Say it out loud. It is so important. I am in charge of my health and wellness. Never give your power away, even to a doctor or medical professional. And I'm not in any way trying to say that we don't want to follow an expert's advice, but even that expert does not know your body as well as you do. And they're so limited on time. Maybe a medical professional gave you some general advice, or maybe you read it or heard it or saw it in a video, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. For example, maybe you've heard the advice that because you have thyroid issues, you shouldn't eat soy. But is that really true? I talked to my doctor about that, and she said, really, the only way that soy would be able to interfere is if you were drinking gallons and gallons of soy milk a day, which I'm certainly not doing. And there's even more research that has come out from some recent plant-based doctors that there's really no reason at all for people who have thyroid issues, which I do have, to not have whole natural soy products. So that might not even be true, but is it really true for you? Test it. Really the only way to know if this advice is true for you or not is to test it. Try it out. And even if you tested it a few months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago, is it still true? It might be true. A lot of people who have arthritis tell me that certain foods will flare up their arthritis. So that might be true for you, but do you know for sure until you've tested it? So mistake number 1 is assuming that food guidance is a food rule that you must follow. So in the comments, tell me, can you relate to this? Have you taken on a certain just bit of advice that a doctor maybe gave you as general guidance, or you read or heard, but you haven't really tested it out, or you haven't tested it out in a while? Mistake number 2 I see is increasing the restriction. We increase the restriction instead of decreasing it. The goal with any type of elimination diet is the least amount of food restriction possible. This is true across all human beings. The greater variety of foods, especially healthy foods that you are eating, the better your health and wellness will be. Dr. Will Bulkowitz, a GI doctor who is the author of Fiber Fueled, talks about this often. The goal is always to add back as many foods as possible, not to take away foods. And when we do restrict, the goal is to do that for the shortest amount of time possible and the least amount of restriction. Now, there are exceptions. If you have an intolerance that is an immune reaction, you might always need to very carefully stay away from those foods. Like if you're going to have anaphylactic shock, that's not what we're talking about. And people who have true celiac disease will always need to avoid gluten. But for most of us, a lot of that restriction is not those issues. That is actually a small minority of people, and of course they need to be very careful. But what happens with restriction, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, is that it often leads to feeling deprived, which leads to overeating and binging. And that's never in your health best interest. I was a binge eater for many years. I've definitely overeaten foods as I've gone through this whole journey that were not good for me and didn't make me feel good. Overeating and binging never helps you feel better. It always makes you feel worse. And it certainly isn't good for your health or your digestion. And please don't assume that you will be the exception to this. It is a biological fact that overly depriving ourselves leads to a period of overeating. And this isn't a moral issue. This isn't an ethical issue, or even to a certain extent a spiritual issue. This is a physical, primitive drive that God built into our bodies to keep us safe and keep us eating. And in fact, we see through different research and studies that people who really don't even have food issues, when they are deprived of certain foods, it leads to overeating. Or if they're deprived of enough food, it leads to overeating. So you're not alone in this, and there's nothing wrong with you if you have a period of strict restriction and then you end up overeating. So if you do have to eliminate, keep these things in mind. Try to keep to one change at a time. After all, if you change more things than one, how do you know what's working or not working for you? We tend to jump on the bandwagon and that's it, I'm giving up gluten, I'm giving up dairy, I'm giving up FODMAPs, I'm giving up soy, I'm giving up this, I'm giving up coffee. Well then, how do you know which thing is working for you? Start small and just change one thing at a time. After all, when you started or now, you're eating all those foods anyway, right? So it's okay to go one step at a time. And keep in mind that when you're eliminating certain foods, sometimes that can cause problems too, because the replacement foods are just as unhealthy, if not even more unhealthy. And then with the restriction that you do need to have in place, what treats and good foods that you enjoy can you include? I got to tell you, during some of my journey with sucrose intolerance, I ate a whole lot of pork rinds. They're not a healthy food. They're totally a junk food, but that was the junk food that I could have. So I ate them and I just went for it. I ate fatty steaks and eggs for a while because that's what I needed to do. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I ate pork chops and I ate the fat. I ate the skin off the chicken, things like that, because that's what I could have. So in the comments, please let me know, have you gone to a place of over restriction? Have you done it too quickly? Are there any ways that you can make your diet less strict, or can you go more slowly? All right, that's mistake number 2, is being overly strict or increasing the restriction or making the restriction go too quickly. Mistake number 3 that I see people making is assume that you'll never eat the foods that you are not supposed to be eating. You'll just tell yourself, I will have more willpower. I will be strong. I will handle it. I can do it. I can handle all of these things. Well, again, unless it's an immune system reaction, of course you would never want to eat anything that would cause anaphylactic shock or be dangerous. If you have celiac, and you do have to be really strict, but again, that's the minority of people. I'm talking about people who are choosing to eliminate to try to help with health issues or digestive issues. We just go in assuming that we are going to be the ones to have the strong enough willpower. Well, let me tell you, I have learned the hard way. That is not me. I have some pretty strong willpower. I've been maintaining a 100-pound weight loss for almost 20 years. I have drastically changed the way I eat. I meal prep. I eat healthy. I exercise, and then I follow that up with healthy foods. And I eat some treats along the way. I've been tracking what I've been eating almost every day this whole entire time. So yes, I've developed tons of healthy habits. I've got a pretty good dose of willpower, but you know what? There were lots of times I totally flubbed up on my diet. Maybe I was supposed to be eliminating a certain food and I ate it. Maybe I would go to a party. Let me just share this example with you. I would go to parties or different events over these last couple of years, and maybe they'd have cake. I love cake, you guys. Cake with frosting. Hello, that's got my name all over it. Love it. I would sit there and watch everybody eating the cake. I could smell the cake. I could see the cake. I could see the frosting on their fingers. I wanted the cake. So maybe I would resist. I wouldn't eat the cake in that moment. But then, you know what would happen later? I would go home and I would totally overeat maybe one of my foods that I was allowed. If I had like sugar-free, keto, almond flour brownies in the freezer, I'd go home and eat 6 of those over the course of the day because I felt so deprived that I didn't get the cake. Or maybe my family would bring home leftovers and then I'd end up eating some of the cake, which I would eat too much of it. So I really would have been better off if I would have just had a small piece of the cake. So what if you made a decision that these foods that you think that you can't eat or shouldn't eat, if you know that there's going to be times that you will eat them, plan it. Plan that you will go ahead and eat the cake. I just want to tell you, nobody's talking about this. You don't read about it. You don't hear about it. But people who are supposed to be eating gluten-free sometimes eat gluten. And people who are supposed to be dairy-free sometimes eat dairy. And people who are supposed to be soy-free sometimes eat soy. We all do it. I mean, if I, who am so careful about what I eat, who had such serious digestive issues, who has been tracking what I've been eating for 20 years, if I was still doing it, I can almost guarantee you that other people are doing it too. So why not just plan it in? Why not say, okay, I'm going to splurge. I'm going to eat this cake that has gluten in it, or I'm going to eat this item that has dairy, or whatever the ingredients are for you. But I'm going to do it in a controlled way. I'm not going to binge on 6 pieces of it. I'm going to have 1 piece. And if you have something that can help mitigate that, like lactate pills or, a digestive enzyme, you're going to take it. And you're going to do it on a day where maybe if you know you're going to be in the bathroom or you are going to have the day off the next day, whatever it is for you, you can do it in a controlled way. That is so much better and healthier for you than binging on it later because you feel so deprived. So in the comments, tell me, can you relate to my experience? Please tell me I'm not the only one. Do you sometimes eat foods that you feel like you shouldn't be eating? And how do you handle that? Would it be better if you would just go ahead and plan that it's okay to have it once in a while? And that leads me to mistake number 4 that I see most often, and I did for myself, and that's beating yourself up for your mistakes. We take on an incredible amount of guilt. Like, first of all, I should be able to control myself. I should have stronger willpower. I should be better at this. And then we add on top of that, it doesn't make me feel good when I eat these foods. I need it for medical reasons, and here I can't even stick with it. And then we feel even more guilty and even worse, which can sometimes lead to eating even more. Give yourself a break. Oh, take a breath. Give yourself some grace. This is hard. This is tough. I can tell you that anytime I've seen some of my family members who really have no food issues, if they have some kind of restriction, they freak out. My family members kind of freak out when they have certain foods that they feel like they can't get, and they don't have food issues like I do. So for those of us who maybe have weight issues or food issues, this is going to be especially challenging. Give yourself grace. I would encourage you to type in the comments, I give myself grace and compassion. Would you type that in the comments and say it out loud? And if you need to say it to yourself every single day during this elimination phase, do it. I give myself grace and compassion. I have had to give myself so much grace and compassion that what I'm doing, it's really hard. It's really tough. These elimination diets were tough. Now, I am in a better place now where I can eat more foods that I couldn't before, but I still have to follow a really strict diet. And I'm still doing all the things that I need to do to maintain this 100-pound weight loss. That's tough. That's challenging. I got to give myself tons of grace that this is hard and I am doing it. So kudos to you. Sometimes I tell myself, good job, Sarah. You can tell yourself that too. Good job. You are doing a really hard thing. And keep in mind, this is a primal, primitive reaction. When we feel deprived, so often there is a reactive overeating or binging or kind of food obsession, because this is a primitive drive. Our hunger drive is primal to who we are and part of what's keeping us alive. If you do decide that you do need to have a restriction on your foods for a certain time because you really do know it makes you feel better, it's so helpful to remind yourself, this is my choice. So if you are choosing to continue with a specific food plan, would you type in the comments, this is my choice? In addition to giving yourself grace and compassion every day, remind yourself every day, this is my choice. When you feel like someone else is doing it to you, that's when you're going to have the rebellion. When you think like, well, so-and-so said I should, or my doctor is telling me I have to, or all the advice says. Remember, none of that really matters at the end of the day. It's you making the choice for your health and wellness. And keep in mind too, nobody else really cares all that much. Like your doctor, he or she doesn't really care that much. If it's a dietitian, they're busy with seeing patients all day long, every day. They don't really care that much. Even like your family members, they just want you to feel better. Your doctor wants to help you. Your nutritionist wants to help you. Your family, they just want you to be well. They don't really care that much. And keep in mind too that sometimes if you're restricting food and that's causing you a lot of stress, that can be just as bad for your health, if not worse, than bringing in the forbidden food, especially if it's just once in a while. So again, can you relate to some of this? Tell me about it in the comments. Are you hard on yourself? Are you putting a lot of guilt on yourself? Share about it so that we know that we're not alone. So those are the 4 mistakes that I see the most often. Let's recap a little bit. Mistake number 1 is assuming that food guidance is a rule that you must follow. Remind yourself, I am in charge of my health and wellness. Mistake number 2 is increasing the restriction. Try to follow the least restriction that you possibly can and continually test for more tolerance so that you can add those foods back. Mistake number 3 is assuming that you'll never eat the foods that aren't allowed because you have good self-control and willpower. Remember that sometimes it's better to eat the off-limits food in a controlled way than to binge on it later or to be really stressed out about it. And mistake number 4 is beating yourself up. Remember, this is hard. Tell yourself, I give myself grace and compassion, and this is my choice. Well, tell me about your experience in the comments. It really helps to know that we're not alone. You are certainly not the only one. I have gone through it. Many of us are going through it too. I want to encourage you, this is possible. You can absolutely lose the weight and maintain the weight that you've lost. You can get to your goal weight even if you need to follow a special diet. I am Sarah with The Holy Mess, and I am here to support you every step of the way. I have meal plans. I have plant-based meal plans. I have an email list. Email us, sarah@theholymess.com, if you would like to join that. Check out my website, and I am here for you. Love you. You can do this.